Hey everyone, and welcome to another Yogi Misfit Sessions. My name is Danny Pomploon, and I am your host. Hope everyone is doing well and having a great week. I know I am. I am just getting back to life and getting reintegrated from Burning Man and taking some time away from the burnout that I had, and definitely came back super recharged, remembering to come back to the basics and really just to nurture and take care of myself. So as a note to all of you guys, from someone that just went through burnout, take care of yourselves, take time out for yourself, and make sure that you are nurturing and checking in and doing all that fun stuff, because it is important. Today is session 89, and I have Tim Senesi on the show. So Tim is actually an online YouTube yoga teacher. He also teaches in person as well, but he's got a really big YouTube following. He does really cool breakdown tutorials. And funny story, actually, I knew Tim through a student of mine up here in San Francisco who used to go to a bunch of his yoga retreats. So that's how we connected. We get down to one of my favorite topics today, which is just the basics and the fundamentals, and something that I've been jamming out for quite a while and that I practice in my classes is, like doing the really basic stuff really well will make all the other big stuff happen. So we chat a little bit about that, which is super great. I think more teachers need to be spreading that message of, just doing the fundamental stuff really, really, really solid to train your body and doing it well. So we'll dive into that in the episode. I wanted to also just share with everybody too, the show has been getting some really fun traction from you guys in support. We recently started this donor box campaign, which is basically a donation to the show to help sustain the show. So surprise, surprise, doing this podcast is not free for me. And the goal is to try to get at least $100 coming through the show in a month. Right now we're up at 10, which is super cool. But that would help sustain the show itself. That way I can continue to create this content, to produce this content, to find guests for the show, and all the stuff that goes into it. You can do a one-time donation, or you can do a recurring donation, and it helps with everything. So from the hosting to the recording to the editing to all the marketing to all the stuff that goes with it, it goes 100% back into the show. And all the budget and stuff, right, will be transparent, so you can see exactly where the dollars are going to. There's a link below to Donor Box, and you can do a one-time or a reoccurring, and I appreciate it. Those that are listening to the show appreciate it. So yeah, you can support, check out our Donor Box link, and let the show thrive and be alive. If you can't do that, remember that you can leave an iTunes review. That takes just a couple minutes, and that also helps the show move up the ranks. Without further ado, here goes session 89 with Tim Senesi. What's going on, Tim?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So funny enough, I actually teach, or I've taught at Dropbox. It's everyone knows Dropbox, right? I think everyone knows Dropbox. But they're a corporate, here located here in San Francisco. And one of my students at Dropbox is actually one of your regular retreat students.
No way. Who's that?
Yeah, is Brian Reed.
Oh, I know Brian.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's such a cool dude. Him and his mustache, man.
His mustache is solid.
Yeah. It's funny though. Like I had kind of circled around. Well, you know how it goes in the yoga universe. You kind of just like circle around certain people, and you hear their names, and like you kind of crash in and out with like certain people. And you were one of them. And I was like, I need to get him on the show soon.
Oh wow, that's so cool.
Yeah,
small world in yoga.
Oh, dude, such a small world. I think we forget that as yoga teachers too, because all we get to like hear and see what each other is doing, and we forget that the world's a lot bigger than just our small little bubble. Mm. So Tim, you're hanging out in Orange County. So I'm up in NorCal. You're down below in SoCal. How's everything going down there?
It's going pretty good. There's a good yoga community here, and I grew up around here, and I've been teaching here for about 10 years. Before that, I was teaching in San Diego.
Yeah.
Just about an hour south of where I'm at, and I love it. It's a great place to be.
You're still doing, and so for the listeners tuning in, Tim is you're just pretty much a YouTube online teacher, yeah? And then you got your retreats as well.
Yeah, I teach like 10 group classes a week.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you were just doing online teaching for some reason.
No.
Cool. Okay, cool. So, but you still have your YouTube stuff going on though.
That's right. That's my main. That's a big focus right now is creating good content for the YouTube channel.
What have you been geeking out on for the YouTube channel?
You know what? I just worked on an arm balance series.
Mm-hmm.
Part of what I wanted to speak about today was building a solid foundation and teaching people about the basics so that they could grow and flourish in their practice. But so I kind of held off on doing an arm balance focused practice for a long time because I really want to make sure that the online community felt well established in the standing poses, that they were developing a balance of strength and flexibility. But
Sure.
this arm balance series I just put together, that's been my main focus over the last month, is trying to create the best sequence that I could.
And when do like when you start to put this stuff together, is it based off of things that you've worked on in the past, or is it is it a buildup, or is you just kind of pick out this random content depending on what you're working on or what you feel like your community needs?
That's a good question. There's always a little bit of the past, workshops that I've taken, things that my teachers have taught me, and then a little bit is just my own experience and exploration
Mhm.
and incorporating what I've learned with anatomy. And so a little bit outside of yoga is just through getting injured from skateboarding and surfing. I've had like probably every uh, joint platform of the body injured. So I've learned a lot through that,
Yeah.
and through different modalities, like learned through physical therapy, and just different things. Like it really helped to add a depth to the practice. Like I learned, oh wow, like lots of yogis lack strength in these areas, and we need to develop strength here before we can ask the body to do certain things. So it kind of, like, the yoga practice to me was more mythical in a sense when I first started, or esoteric. Like I thought, oh, it's just this beautiful like thing that all flows together. And then through learning anatomy, then I was able to look at it more scientifically. Like, oh, there's actually progression now. If I make this stronger and this flexible, then it opens me up for that. So a little bit of that too. And I had the unique experience of like blowing out my rotator cuff 2 years ago in a horrible skateboarding slam. And so I tore 4 different things in my shoulder. And it took me about a year to be able to just get full range of motion and being able to weight bear and everything. And then after that, I had to rebuild my whole practice of being able to do what I originally was able to do. So it really helped me to be able to articulate what needed to happen to get into the arm balances and then inversions. Whereas
Mhm.
before, it kind of came naturally to me because I started yoga kind of young. So I would be like, "Oh, just do crow pose, just hook your knees, go into it." And now
Right.
oh man, it took me so long to regain that flexibility. I was much more mindful about what it was like. So I look at that experience as a blessing in a sense, because it's helped to add a layer dimension to my teaching.
There's a couple things that you mentioned that one, I totally get the injury part. Either it's just snowboarding and skateboarding and all the boarding period, you're going to go down at some point.
Right.
There's like no way around it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love what you said. Like you thought it was just like this really esoteric, like, oh, it's so like magical and beautiful, but there's actually a really big analytical side to the physical yoga practice. I think one thing that people forget is like the asana is just a part of this bigger thing called yoga, right? It's like it's
Mm,
one leg of it. Same with the pranayama, same with the meditation. And the asana part has like moved and developed into so many different ways. I mean, I've had recently I've had some really cool guests on the show, about how it's more less of the linear movements that we're taught, like this is how you do yoga because this is how we were taught to do yoga, and more of like the how can we explore this a little bit deeper, and how can we go further into these different poses with either biomechanics or playing around with weight load or playing around with levers or playing around with the relationship to gravity with things. And there's so much more that goes into it. And I honestly think if it's just it's if it helps you self inquire a little bit deeper, it's still considered yoga in my opinion. And then there is the other side of it, the esoteric part, the teachings of yoga, the philosophy of yoga, the chanting part of yoga. There's so much more that goes into it, and it kind of just arrives as you need it, I guess.
Right. That's a good point.
One of the things that you were saying, I know, is, I guess, perfect segue to start to dive in is, building a really solid foundation between, rather than jumping into, like vinyasa right away. I'm of the school of thought that before you actually jump into a vinyasa class or any real yoga class, you should have to, like when you go to CrossFit and they
Hmm.
do, I don't know if you've ever CrossFitted before, but
I
uh,
haven't, but I
I have.
understand. I understand a little bit. I have some friends into it. Are
Okay,
into it.
so my tall, skinny ass actually goes to CrossFit. Yes, believe it or not, and I love it mainly because I can't go to the gym and lift weights on my own. Like that just sounds awful to me. It sounds terrible. Like I can rock climb and snowboard and all the other things, but I just can't go to the gym and lift things up. It's awful. So I go somewhere where I'm told to do it because it's better and it works. But before you start going to CrossFitting classes, like to the group classes, they actually make you do an onboarding series. So it's like 3 different classes, or sometimes it's 4 depending on the gym or whatever, but you go over these basic movements and they won't let you go into the next class until you're done with these movements, and they see that you understand them and that you've got like the foundations of them, and
Mm,
then you move into like the next class, and then you move into the next class, and then finally you do this little test, and then at the end of the test, if you pass everything, then you can start going to the normal CrossFit classes. And I
mm,
kind of feel like we should do the same in yoga almost. I feel like
mm.
some really simple movements like, chaturanga, and which is a really hard thing to do.
Right.
Chaturanga is so difficult, and we teach
Right.
it right out of the gate. Like it's just
Yeah.
immediately one of the first things that people start doing is chaturanga, and it is extremely difficult.
Right.
Like chaturanga and down dog and like I would love to see some sort of world, some perfect world where we had like this little like onboarding kind of session into yoga, because I think so many people get scared and get turned away from yoga and get scarred from it because they're not ready for it, and they jump into a class that's just not necessarily for them, or there's not enough options for them.
That's such a good point. Or it's often I think it's that people are already athletic and they want to get a certain amount of physical activity from their class. So they see, I'm not going to go to the beginner class. I'm already pretty athletic. I'll go to the level 2 class. I'll go to the Vinyasa class because I'll get a good workout, and they don't realize that there is the progression, and without the onboarding, without the basics, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And what you mentioned about the chaturanga, that's such an important point, is that I in the 30-day challenge that I did this year, I do a 30-day challenge every year on my YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to give people access to the Vinyasa yoga practice. So this was kind of like the foundation to be able to do a Vinyasa yoga practice. I taught people all the muscles that they needed to be strengthening and stretching to be able to do a chaturanga and a down dog, because people like these very popular poses that we think of uh, as standard yoga poses like downward dog. Many beginners shouldn't be doing downward dog. It requires quite a bit of flexibility and strength to be able to do that. I usually have beginners start off with like puppy dog stretch, hands at the wall or hands on a chair seat, just trying to get the lines of energy. And even as you mentioned before, yeah, there is so much more than linear in yoga. But first, the line, like if you learn math, first you have to learn to add and subtract before you can learn to do calculus, and
Totally.
the depth that is in there. So it's like that. It can be like that with yoga as well.
It's funny too because I mean, not only in addition to that, but the thing that you just said is but then all these yoga classes are like mixed levels. Everything in yoga is
Yeah,
mixed levels.
it's tough.
So you're going back to like let's do calculus and subtraction and addition all in the same class.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's insane. One, I have a I. There have been times in classes where I have some assistants in my classes as well, and I always, will one, I encourage them to obviously take care of themselves, but also take care of the people in the room. There are certain people though sometimes where I'll be like, you need to go pull that person out of class and go show them X, Y, and Z before they can come
Mm,
back in, just because they're not going to get it down, one, or two, they're going to injure themselves.
right.
And I also think that there's this very there's this big sense in yoga right now where like the bigger is better, you know, like, or bigger is better rather. And if we can do all these really cool poses, it's good. But I think what people forget is if you can do really simple poses really well, the other big poses happen.
Right. That's a really good point. And it's something that one of my teachers that I studied with in the Iyengar yoga tradition, so they have these levels of yoga teachers, and he was the senior advanced teacher, like the highest level of certification. I would go and study with him there in San Francisco. And I was taking these advanced level classes where it was mostly teachers and all with very advanced practices. And he would teach all of the actions that you needed for basically all the advanced asanas, but in the most basic poses. So you'd have to learn in Warrior One how to get thoracic extension that would completely change your back bends. And so we'd be doing these very basic standing poses. And at times I would think, this is really boring. You know, when I first started with him, I was young, I was in my 20s. And I was thinking, like, this is so boring. I want to be able to do all the fancy poses. Why is this guy not teaching? All these people here are capable. And my local yoga teacher at the time would come to these workshops, and she would kind of explain. She'd be like, okay, well, after the class, do your TikToks and see how much they've changed. Which is doing a handstand into Urdhva and then back over. And sure enough, her point is that what you're able to access in your body helped you in all the advanced poses. So it comes from these smaller actions and being able to do them in basic poses before you can apply them into the more advanced stuff.
Are you currently working on any of that stuff, like in your own public classes?
In my own public classes? Well, since I got on this whole arm balance kick, just myself trying to relearn how to do them myself and then do them for the video series, I've been heavy into the arm balances lately. But not so much. When I first started teaching yoga, dropbacks were really popular, and then it kind of changed to handstand. Like, for example, if you ask someone right now, they're like, oh, they're so good at yoga, they can do a handstand. So that's kind of become like the marker of if somebody is proficient at yoga. Versus when I first started yoga, it was like, oh my gosh, they can do a standing drop back. They're really good at yoga. Which, again, these are like completely random things to be good at. It doesn't make you good at yoga. But yeah, so that when I first started, I was all about trying to get people into drop backs and back bends like that. And then it's kind of shifted to where I like people to be more well-rounded and focused on more on the fundamentals. Really what I saw is that more that the more people are focused on these extreme ranges of motion, is that it was like walking a fine line, like you were on a razor's edge, and if you slipped, you're going to cut yourself. And that's what I started to find more and more, is that people were getting injured. They were cutting themselves, and then they weren't able to practice for a while. So I became less interested in pushing people in their regular practice to moving into extremes, and encouraging them to practice it less frequently, to keep doing the foundational work, but then to avoid the extreme ranges of motions because of how much injury that I was seeing.
Has it shifted your own practice? Just, you know, I mean, one, your injury, but two, you know, like the way that you have now been teaching, has it shifted the way that you practice currently, like on your own?
Definitely. Yeah, when I first started yoga, and I think often people when they first start, they're drawn towards the fantastic stuff. Like, I opened the Book of Light on Yoga, and I thought, okay, the goal of yoga is to be able to do all this stuff. That means that you're good at yoga.
You will be enlightened once you can do it.
Yeah, and that was my aim, and I was very excited about yoga, and I wanted to do all this stuff. And what I found was that the asana, like you said initially, the asana was just a part of it. And having to take time off, I've explored the other facets of yoga, gotten deeper into meditation, pranayama, And that's helped me a bunch to have a deeper perspective as to what I'm doing on the mat, so that when I'm in a pose, it's not so much of, there's more going on than just in the pose. And this is spoken about often in the anger method, how everything can be encompassed in the, while you're practicing the physical asana. It can be, you can be practicing dharana and dhyana within the pose. You can be practicing this intense level of concentration and focus and moving out of the mind. And so more of my practice is about that, getting this time of moving meditation, and then just keeping myself moving healthy. I'm less interested in the fantastical range of motion, just because of its what comes is the tendency to go into your joints and to eventually burn out. And also what I started to see in the yoga community is that teachers, some of my senior teachers and people who've been practicing teaching for into their 50s were burning out their joints completely. Like, we're having to get hip replacements, or like burning out their lower backs. And then so I realized, well, okay, why this shouldn't be. Yoga is something to keep you healthy.
Right.
So instead of, and back to what I mentioned at the beginning, is I think a lot of the, sure, there's excitement, and there's the tapas, the burning desire to deepen your yoga practice, which is all very important, and it should be nurtured and cultivated. But at the same time, we should be clear as to what the tapas is, and then what the ego is. And if the ego is being strengthened through what I can do. I mean, the developing ego in a child is like, look at me, look what I can do. I can climb this tree. So then often in yoga, I think that we're seeing that we can see that through our social media platforms, etc. It can be like, look what I can do. And then people think that that's something that should be nurtured in a yoga practice. But at the same time, it's not all negative, because at the same time, it encourages people. And one of the things that I always say is, even though I just said what I said, watching David Swenson practice Ashtanga yoga motivated me to deepen my practice. So, and not from an ego sense, just how beautiful he's able to flow from these advanced poses made me want to be able to move freely like that.
If you were to say, there's like these 4 to 5 sets of poses, or poses that people should really dial in before anything else, what would they be?
That's a good question. I would stick with the 5 basic standing poses. I would say that you should be really proficient in the standing poses before, and that just goes back to my foundation in Iyengar yoga. So, but the thing is that it does not set you up for vinyasa, I realize, because then you have to learn like a plank and a down dog. So, however, if you're able to hold the 5 basic standing poses with good alignment, you're developing core strength, back strength, hip mobility. You're developing strength in the legs. The legs are inherently tamasic. So most people come to yoga with the legs turned off.
Right.
And so a big portion of our practice is just teaching people to stand on their feet again.
Right.
Because of all the time we spend seated, wearing shoes where our feet aren't really turned on, it's really important from the roots to start to nourish the body again. And even people that I see like can do some pretty fantastic things with their body, they can't do a chair pose because they don't know how to turn on their postural chain when they go into a squatted position. So, and that's just a product of having never become proficient in the 5 basic standing poses.
Got it. I understand. And now when people want to start to transition into the vinyasa practice, what do you recommend?
So the after they've gained a foundation in the standing poses, then I go into strengthening the back body through belly back bends, which is kind of a crude way to do it. There are more efficient ways to do it with resistance training. However, without any resistance, what I do in the 30-day challenge is I have people do this prone work to help to strengthen the external rotators, the backs of the shoulders, because I'm sure as a teacher you've seen is that when the average person tries to lower into chaturanga, they don't have the strength in their shoulders and their back to be able to keep the integrity of the shoulder girdle such that the shoulder internally rotates and sinks onto the chest. Mm-hmm. And then that sets them up for a caved chest when they're going into upward facing dog. So doing that repetitively starts to put a lot of strain on your shoulder. And then it's also doing the opposite of what we're trying to do in Vinyasa yoga. With the Vinyasa, we're like working on opening up the heart. Most people come to yoga with their chest closed. And then we're just like building more chest closing with the Vinyasa. So what I do in this 30-day series is it's basically like cactus arms. So you lie on your belly, you do cactus arms, you focus on engaging the external rotators, and then do an extended version of Shalabhasana with the arms forward to start to strengthen the traps to hold the arms, but without shrugging. Yeah. So we alternate between going into that and then the arms back position. So it's kind of like this little vinyasa that I created. But then even before that, I have people do mobility exercises with the shoulders, because your average person, if you put them on their belly and ask them to do that, all the wrong muscles will take over to hold the arms up. So we just do like little mobility exercises with the shoulders and the neck to kind of warm them up, and then go through that belly back bend series. And in the belly back bend series, I have them really focus on not arching too much into the back bend and more focus on elongating and just hovering above the floor.
That's super
and for me, that's important to develop the core strength and develop the connection between the back and the core.
That's extremely smart. I think a lot of people forget. It's easy to forget, because we're such front-bodied creatures that like strengthening our back body needs so much love, and all we end up doing is like putting so much length into it. We really just need to get really stronger and tight. People in their hamstrings who are always complaining like hamstrings are tight. Your hamstrings probably need to get a lot stronger than you think they do.
Right. That's a really good point.
It's so true. Like people forget that, and same thing with, back body and, the entire back line of the body, I think just gets missed. There's so much opportunity for strength there. And I think it just gets missed over and over and over again.
Right. Yeah. And that's we teach the beginners from the front body, because that's what they can see. That's what they're identified with. But just because you can't see the back body doesn't mean it doesn't need work. Like you said, it's so important. And what I started to notice after teaching Vinyasa for a little bit is that most people couldn't do a Warrior 3. That as soon as they went to step up and load one leg, the whole kinetic chain would just turn off. And then trying to twist on top of that, I was like, oh man, like people can't even do Warrior 3. Then they're going to try to do twisted half moons and things. And like, this is so bad for the body because you were just strengthening this bad posture.
Right.
So it really made me think about, well, what type of exercise do people need to help to strengthen those muscles so that they can hold their kinetic chain when they go to balance on one leg?
That's super smart. I think I do this thing called you do in Warrior. You were talking about it in your Vinyasa thing, but in Warrior 3, where I kind of do like cactus arms, but I bend the elbows and lift them up towards the ceiling. So you kind of look like a scarecrow. You know what I mean? I call it scarecrow, but you bend the back leg too as well. So then you're really focusing on firing up the hamstrings, and the front leg can't straighten out. You got to bend that as well. So it's literally like back body super strengthener extreme.
That's good. I like that. That's like a more advanced progression of what I'm going to teach that in next year's level 2 30-day challenge. That's a good one.
So long as you're like brought to you by Danny Pamplun.
There you go.
Well, thanks, Tim. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom. And actually I can't wait to check out your little 30-day course and see what I can pick up on there. I can't wait to try that vinyasa out on the back body, see how it feels.
Oh yeah. Check it out.
Yeah, well, for sure. Well, until the next Yogi Misfit sessions, this is Danny and Tim saying peace out.
Thanks, Danny. Appreciate it.
Hey, I don't know if you heard, but I now have a Danny Pamplun collaboration yoga shorts for men in collab with Workshop. They make really, really, really amazing women's yoga clothes and men's yoga clothes. And the cool thing is they're locally based in Los Angeles. A really good friend of mine actually runs the show down there and creates all the art. So we know where it's coming from. We know it's sustainable, and we know that we're supporting local. You can check out the shorts below in the link, and you can also check out all their other clothes. And if you use the code Danny, you'll get 10% off $75 or more purchase, which is super cool. So check out Workshop and tell me what you think of the Danny shorts.